Today, we are talking about a heartbreaking case that starts with a runaway note and ends with a 15-year-old girl brutally murdered in a Utah river. Her name was Anne Kasprzak. She told her friends that she was pregnant. She left home late at night, but just hours later, her body was discovered and her injuries were so severe that police couldn't even identify her age or her race. So, what really happened that night? Did she run away or was she lured out by someone she trusted? This case takes some wild turns. We've got a false tip from a jailed informant, tale as old as time, a detective killed in the line of duty, and a confession from a teenage killer who nearly got away with it. So, let's break it down, you guys. Before we get into the case, I do want to give a hey girl thanks to Beth for writing this one up. Thank you. And this is requested by Brianna Lynn and Cassidy Williams. And I'm also going to say Brianna Lynn just in case I did that wrong. So hopefully one of those is right. And thank you guys so much for requesting this. I was not familiar with this case, and man, it is heartbreaking. You can also, if you want to watch something on it, you could watch True Crime with Aphrodite Jones, Too Young to Die, Season 6, Episode 10. If you wanted to. That shows a little. They do reenactments. I don't like the ones that do the acted reenactments. Just you've got the people there to talk about it. Just let them talk about it. We don't need the un-Academy Award winning acting, I guess I'll say. All right. So Anne, who went by Annie Grace Kasprzak, was born on January 10th, 1997, a wee little baby. Annie was unfortunately abandoned by her birth mother at a very young age, and she ended up living in 5 different foster homes before she met Veronica. So at the time, Veronica was a social worker for family services, and so she worked with Annie. And she felt this really deep connection with her. And so she talked to her husband about it at the time. His name is Dennis. And he was like, why don't we adopt her? Like, she's been through a lot of foster homes. She's obviously had a really tough go of it. You seem to have a really strong connection with her. Like, let's do it. So Veronica and Dennis adopted Annie, and then she instantly became a big sister to their sons. They had 2. Annie had a total of 5 brothers between her mom, Veronica, her stepdad, James, her father, Dennis, and stepmom, Jennifer. So, very blended big family, right? When Annie was 10 years old, she ended up being diagnosed with reactive attachment disorder, which is completely understandable given her upbringing and the fact that she had been through the foster system so many times and all of those things. She didn't trust that people would love her and take care of her, and she always expected to be disappointed. And Veronica told Aphrodite Jones in the episode I mentioned that when Annie wanted to connect with you, she was sweet, she was kind, she was loving, all of those things. But if she didn't want to connect with you, she literally didn't want anything to do with you. Like, get out of her face with that, okay? She's not dealing with it. Sometime after having adopted Annie, Dennis and Veronica unfortunately had to make the decision to file for divorce. Because of her reactive attachment disorder, Annie obviously, I mean, either way, you could expect that she would have a very difficult time with this, but this is completely earth-shattering for her. I mean, that completely rocks her stability world. Right? And it was more so the move to a new home and new school than the divorce itself. So not only has the family life, and it's really sad too, because, in her mind, she's like, I don't know if I can trust this. I've never been able to trust that the people who say they're going to love me and take care of me are actually going to do that. And then she gets comfortable. She still may have been a little timid about it. But then these parents get divorced. And then she has to move. And then she has to move school. So now everything is kind of in disarray for her again. And probably her mindset was, I knew this would happen. I knew it. Nothing ever stays like it's supposed to for me. It's just really, really sad. Annie loved to listen to music. She loved to hang out with her friends, just like any other teenager. But as she got older, she actually fantasized more and more about starting her own family. And remember from before, she was only 15 when she passed away. So she was really, really wanting to do that. I mean, super early. Now, when I was a teenager, every boy that I liked, I 100% in my notebook practiced like my first name with their last name. I think that's what we do as teenage girls. Did I have baby names picked out? Yeah, you bet your butt I did. You bet your bottom dollar I sure did. Was I positive? I mean, gosh, my kindergarten boyfriend, I already knew we were going to have like 3 babies. He was going to be a race car driver because we were in kindergarten, and that's what he wanted to be then. And I was going to be a stay-at-home mom because that's who I thought I was when I was 5. That's not who I am now. I am constantly in awe of any parent who can stay home with the children. That is the Lord's work, let me tell you. But I thought I was going to do it. And he was going to be a race car driver because that is obviously a very logical job that one would have as they grow up. Or he was going to be a professional baseball player or something. I don't know. But she was 15. And not only was she like, oh, I can't wait to have my own kids, which also I completely understand from her perspective too, because like when I was 15, when I was a teenager, what I wanted to be one day was to grow up and be married and have babies. That's what I wanted to be. Podcast didn't exist yet, y'all. Ew, that I'm old. Also, I had to eat Rolaids before I started this because my lunch gave me a little heartburn. So yes, I am old. And I also had to ice my hip earlier. So anyway, but that's what I wanted to be. But at the time that I was in high school, I didn't yet know that I had an unstable relationship with my mom or an unstable like mother figure yet. I hadn't gone through all the stuff I went through with my mom. I was 20 when it got really, really bad and she just like up and left. But since that happened, well, after my mom left, I no longer believed in Mother's Day as a holiday. It felt very much like Flag Day to me in the breakup. Father's Day to me in the breakup, where Justin Long's character is like, happy holidays. And, he says it all the time or whatever. And he's like, some people recognize Father's Day as a holiday. I do not. Like, that's how I felt about Mother's Day. Like, no, I don't believe in that. I couldn't fathom once my mom left how anybody around me could be close to their moms. Like, I envied it, but I couldn't understand it. But then once I had my own children, I was like, okay, I can rewrite what a mother is, because in my brain, a mother was a cold, hard bitch to me, So like once I had my kids, I was like, you know what? I can put back a positive connotation with the word mother because I can do it the way that I never got it. I can watch the things that my mom did that I feel like was a blueprint of what not to do. And now I can do the opposite of that. And so I can rewrite what motherhood is to me, what Mother's Day is, that kind of stuff. That felt like kind of what Annie was thinking. Now, she was only 15, but she really, 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 really wanted to start her own family. She really wanted to have a baby. And I think some of the people around her were like, I don't get it because she was so young. But immediately I was like, I get that. Because then you can create the family life for your children and you can almost like, I'm going to date myself again in this, but like rewind the tape and tape back over it, Like, that's kind of what it felt like to me. And her mom, Veronica, said, we couldn't give her, like, we were never going to leave her. We were never going to abandon her in like, we're just going to drop you and never talk to you again. But we couldn't give her the biological connection that she craved with a family. But if she had her own child, she would also have a biological connection too. So it's just so sad. Okay. On Saturday, March 10th, 2012, in Draper, Utah, Veronica went to check on Annie in her bedroom, and this is about 9 p.m. But when she gets in there, Annie's not in there. So Veronica calls down to her husband, and Annie's stepfather, James, was asked, hey, is she down there for some reason? Like, did I miss her? Is she down there and I just didn't know it? James is like, no, she's not down here with me. So Veronica's starting to freak out. So James rushes upstairs and they're looking around Annie's room and they find a note left by Annie. And the note said she was running away and she told her parents, don't bother looking for me. She said that she was capital P, which Veronica knew meant pregnant. However, Veronica knew that Annie was not actually pregnant because before all of this happened, Annie had admitted to Veronica that she'd had sex. And so Veronica took her right in and got her some birth control. And so Veronica told Aphrodite Jones that the reason Annie had told her friends she was pregnant was for the attention and the concern that she would get. She thought that people around her would be like, oh my gosh, that's so, like she wanted that attention. According to her parents, Annie never left home more than an hour or two at a time, and she never left at night. So this was really, really out of the ordinary for Annie. And they're very, very concerned. Very concerned. This was not a situation where they walked in and they were like, oh, maybe she snuck out and she's hanging out with a friend. That did not happen. I think if my parents went into my room when I was this age and I wasn't in there and they couldn't find me in the house, it would also have been immediate panic. I did not do anything that broke a rule. I was petrified of that. And we lived out in the country. There was nowhere I could go anyway. What was I going to do? Walk 20 miles to freaking the next person's house? That I knew anyway. This was really concerning for them. No, she doesn't leave the house. She doesn't go anywhere. We always know where she is. If she's going to hang out with a friend, we know about it. They probably dropped her off and picked her up kind of thing, So this is concerning. So they end up calling. Veronica calls Annie's on again, off again boyfriend. His actual name is Darwin Bagshaw, but he went by Chris, and girl, I would too. I don't blame you. After getting no answer, when she was calling Annie's phone, Annie wasn't answering. So she's like, you know what? Let me call Chris and see if he knows. Chris answers and she's like, hey, is Annie with you? I can't find her anywhere. I'm super worried. He's like, no, I haven't seen her, but I talked to her earlier today. And he's like, yeah, super weird. Actually, Annie told me that she was going to run away with some guy named LJ. And Veronica's like, who the fuck is LJ? I've never heard this name before. What are you even saying to me? He's like, I don't know. That's what she told me. Okay. So Veronica called the police to report her 15-year-old daughter as a runaway. Now, to the police's credit, they get out to the home really quickly. They put out an APB, an all points bulletin, which we already know. These TV shows, when they're like, so the police issued an APB, which stands for, I'm like, get out of my face with that. Of course I know what that stands for. But if you don't know, that's okay too. It's an all points bulletin. So they did do that, because how many cases have we heard where the police are like, well, she ran away. Like, well, she's not allowed to. She's 15. So anyway, they didn't do that. She was described as being last seen in jeans, a red plaid shirt, a black tank top, and being 5 feet tall. The police worked with Veronica and James to track Annie via her cell phone's GPS. Based on the tracking, they saw that Annie actually was not far from home at all. And at first, she was moving really slowly. It looked like she was just walking somewhere. And apparently this is walking if you're on YouTube. But all of a sudden, out of nowhere, so it's like a slow speed as if she's walking. And then all of a sudden, the speed, it's like she zooms and then it's gone. It just disappears. Literally the track just goes away. And they're like, okay, what just happened? They're watching this happen. This is wild. But they can't track her anymore. It's gone. So the police start searching for Annie at her last known location via the cell phone data. And Veronica is out looking for her all night, but they don't find any sign of her at all, unfortunately. The next day, Sunday, March 11th, 2012. Just 14 hours after Annie went missing, a jogger called 911 after spotting a pool of blood on a rock by a pedestrian bridge on the Jordan River in a park. Now, you guys know, this is why I don't believe in jogging. Don't do it. You either find something nefarious or something nefarious finds you. And I know jogging is good for you, but at what cost? You know what I'm saying? Like, how traumatizing for this poor jogger who's just trying to like work on his or her fitness. I don't remember if it was a man or a woman. And then you find this. It's terrible. The jogger told the dispatcher that he thought it was possible that it was animal blood, but there was also a shoe in the water right by the blood. So the police went out to and thank goodness he called it in, because some people would have been like, oh man, an animal must, and sure, maybe that could have been the case, but thank goodness he called it in, because in this case, that's not what happened. So again, at least everybody's taking it seriously. Like 10 out of 10 on not all witnesses. We'll get to the witnesses that are not 10 out of 10. But okay, so far, 10 out of 10 on this jogger, 10 out of 10 on the police response. I really do think this is better than we have seen so many other times. So the police go out there and they test the blood on that rock just to see, is it human or is it animal? Well, it is not animal. It's human blood. So they track a trail of blood from the bridge down an embankment and into the river. And they called for a helicopter to search from above. Again, 12 out of 10. They called fucking helicopter in. They are not messing around. I love this. So minutes later, the officers in the helicopter call over the radio and they say, hey, we did find a body. It appears to be a female in the river. So they pull the body in, but they can't determine her age or her race because her face had been so badly beaten and she did only have one shoe on. Okay, you guys, it's just terrible. Just hang in there, okay? The media quickly got wind of the discovery of the body and they reported on it. However, James and Veronica were not notified by the police yet. So they found out with everybody else on the news that, oh, hey, a body has been found in the river. It's a female. Initially, the police thought who they found was like 20s, late 20s, early 30s. Again, they could not tell because of the state of her face. It's awful. But they hear about this on the news and they're like, oh my God. And I think James was trying to talk Veronica off a ledge here a little bit because he's like, we don't know that it's her. Like it could be somebody else, but like they both knew. So they call the police and they say, hey, our daughter is missing. We reported her as a runaway. Could this be her? So they sent a police officer out to their house and they asked them, does Annie wear braces? And she was like, I knew in that moment that it was her, like for sure. So they did positively identify Annie. Dr. Edward Lease performed an autopsy on Annie's body on March 12th, and it was determined that her cause of death was multiple blunt force injuries of the head, including but not limited to skull fractures. And she had so many defensive wounds, like a lot of defensive wounds. Her manner of death was determined to be homicide. Detective Derek Johnson was the lead detective on the case in the beginning of the investigation, so he sat down with Chris, Annie's boyfriend, after he contacted the police himself with a tip. Plus, he also had been the last known person to speak with Annie the night that she was killed. Chris told the police that he knew who may have killed Annie. He said that the guy that she was allegedly going to run away with that night, LJ, had threatened to beat Chris up. He said, yeah, I think I talked to him once. They're like in person, on the phone, via email. Like, what, did he fucking fax you? Like, how'd that happen? He was like, yeah, I think it was on the phone. Okay. He also knew about the rumor that he had gotten Annie pregnant. And he was like, I did not get her pregnant. He said that the night Annie was killed, he was at his grandmother's house. His dad had gone out drinking with some friends. And so his dad had asked Chris, just go stay with your grandmother, I guess. So I guess he His dad wasn't planning on coming home. I don't know. He also said that he had called a friend of his to hang out, but that friend couldn't do that. So here we are. While interviewing Chris, one officer noted that he was wearing brand new shoes, and they were, if the Aphrodite Jones show is correct in the attire, those shoes were, pearly white. They were brand new. They were white. There was no other color on the shoe. So like with white shoes, you can tell when they're new, because they get dirty pretty quick. They were new. And so they were like, okay, so how new are these shoes? It's like, oh yeah, I just got them. They're like, well, where's your old shoes? Can we see those? And he's like, I can let you see them. So he goes and gets them and they're like, well, we need to clear these, so we'll have to bring them with us. He's like, well, but I don't really have any other shoes. Like, these are really my main pairs. And his dad was like, no, you can take those shoes. Like, I just bought him these other new shoes. So yeah, that's fine. He'll be fine with just these shoes for now. Okay. Then Chris says, I do need to tell you something about those shoes, though. Here's the thing. You're going to find some of Annie's blood on them. Not for any nefarious type reason or anything like that. No. Innocent explanation. Actually, Annie and I were hanging out the other day and she got a nosebleed, as people do. And she got she got some of her nosebleed blood on my shoe. And they said, well, how long ago was that? And he said, I think it was like 5 days ago. And they're like, was anybody else with you that could corroborate this story? And he said, actually, yes, there was. His name is Spencer Criddle. So they go talk to Spencer. Spencer corroborates the story. He says, yeah, I think I remember something about her having a nosebleed because we were all hanging out together. And he says on the night of the murder that Spencer, was at the gym with his brother. And then Spencer showed the police a video he had on his phone of him, Chris, and Annie from sometime before this. And in the video, they said Annie flashed a gang sign. And so the police were like, was Annie involved in criminal or gang activity? And he was like, well, I don't know, but this guy, LJ, she's been seeing or whatever, or was going to run away with, is definitely in a gang. I don't know what the gang sign was that she flashed. I have to wonder if it was something totally like innocent. And they were like, was that a gang sign? Like, I don't know. I don't know any gang signs, so I don't know, but I don't know. We'll get to whether or not Annie was involved in gang activity, I guess. Okay. So according to other people that the police talked to, LJ had hacked into Annie's computer and then threatened to beat Chris up. And Annie was concerned about it. And when talking to Annie's friends, investigators learned that Annie had been planning on running away with Chris because she wanted to get married. With Chris, not LJ. Remember, Chris and Spencer are like, oh, she's going to run away with this LJ. But all of her friends say, no, she wants to marry Chris. They're supposed to be running away together. And remember, she was pregnant, at least in their view. And they said that Chris was not on board with that. At first, she didn't know if he wanted to keep the baby. Then Detective Johnson got a tip from a woman in a neighboring town named Joanna Franklin. So Joanna had been arrested on fraud charges. And she told the police, I know who killed Annie because I was there. She was hoping that with the information she provided, they would drop her fraud charges. So according to Joanna, Annie had been at a party at the home of a man named Daniel Ferry. He was a local drug dealer and also a gang member. Detective Johnson was familiar with Daniel because of his record, so this seemed like it could maybe carry weight. It's at least a name he knows. It's a real person. Joanna said Annie was at the party on March 10th, 2012 with some guy named LJ. And this was the second time she'd seen this guy, LJ. She said he was Hispanic, but he looked white and he was 19 years old. However, she said that night, Daniel, the homeowner, was wanting to have sex with Annie. And Annie said, no, thank you. I would not like to do that. And so apparently he freaked out about it because God forbid you say no to sex. And oh, by the way, he was like 31 years old and she's 15. Anyway, so he wants to have sex. She says, no, thank you. And he smashes her head against the wall. And then he picked her up, carries her out to his vehicle, drives away. He was with a friend. When Daniel and the friend come back, they were gone for a period of time. Joanna said she was definitely still alive when she left. And when they came back, they said, oh, we took her for a swim or something like that, or she went for a swim. And they were covered in blood. Did she call anybody after that? No. But now that fraud charges are on the line, we've got to save our own ass. Forget about the implications of he smashed her head against the wall, took her out in a car, came back covered in blood. And I've never seen her. Oh, and now she's missing. Oh, and now she's dead. Anyway, no, we don't call about that. So they go to Daniel Ferry's house, they search it, and the carpet's been pulled up. The walls have been painted, and there was blood evidence that they collected. So 31-year-old Daniel Ferry was brought in for questioning on March 19th, 2012, and they were like, tell us about it, LJ. He's like, I don't even know an LJ. They were like, shut up. Tell us about Annie then. He's like, I don't know Annie. I don't know anybody named, I don't know these people. And they were like, well, obviously you're lying. So tell us the truth. And he's like, shut up, I want a lawyer. So that's over. Joanna's home was also searched. And when the forensic results came back from the lab, neither home had Annie's blood inside of it. Detective Johnson could not corroborate Joanna's story about Annie. However, Daniel had brutally assaulted a woman around the time of Annie's murder, and he was convicted for that crime, and Joanna's fraud charges were dropped. Joanna later testified that she had tweaked the story to be what Detective Johnson wanted to hear, and that she lied and doesn't remember the story she told. Can we not, please? Can we not? Your little fraud charge is not more important than the murder of a young girl. Are you kidding me? You're so vain. You think the story's about you. Gosh. But what's crazy to me is they just dropped the fraud. Why? Why did she still get what she wanted out of that? Ugh. And when this lead was being investigated, it was a shock to Annie's parents because they were like, no, Annie does not use drugs. No, she is not involved with drug dealers. No, she is not partying all the time. They were like, absolutely not. Annie was adamantly against drugs because it was the reason that her biological mom had all her children taken away from her. So she did not want to go down that path. The investigation continued, and at this point, it had been about a year since Annie's murder, and Jacqueline Moore was promoted to detective, and Detective Johnson was then promoted to sergeant. They had actually gone to the academy together. Detective Moore had been really looking forward to working with Detective Johnson, but once his promotion took effect, he couldn't work on Annie's case anymore, and she became the lead detective, but now the only detective investigating Annie's murder. And she was pretty upset with Detective Johnson. I'm sorry, now Sergeant Johnson. And he was like, look, I'll help you any way that I can on the case. But he was on patrol now from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. When is he really going to be able to do that? And, now she's kind of on her own and she's new. She's only been a detective for, I think, a couple months at that point. Like, it wasn't very long. So she was pretty upset about that. And then one morning, Sergeant Johnson is finishing up his shift and he's on patrol. And so he drives past what he believed was a stranded motorist. And so he pulls up next to the car and rolls his window down and he says, hey, is everything okay? Like, do you need help? The driver pulls out a gun and just shoots at him several times. He was able to drive away, but he had been shot through his aorta and he ended up crashing his car and he died on scene. And he was young. I mean, it's just terrible. So with Sergeant Johnson being the only other person who had worked on Annie's case from the beginning, Detective Moore was like, okay, at this point, I'm going to treat this like a cold case. I'm going to start it completely over. Like, I don't have him to fill in any gaps for me. I don't have him to ask any questions. I'm going to just have to start over. The first person she wants to speak to is Chris Bagshaw. But he doesn't live in Draper, Utah anymore. He had moved to Grand Junction, Colorado to live with his mom. He said that he didn't want to talk to the police anymore. So Detective Moore took another look at those sneakers that they had tested back in the beginning of the investigation. She wanted to see if someone would be able to tell her if the blood on the shoe was actually from a bloody nose or if it was from something else. Now, you can't, at least at this time that I'm aware of, you can't test blood and then be like, well, this is nose blood versus if you cut your finger, you know? But what they could do was retest the shoes. And this time they used an M-Vac machine. And so the bottom of the shoes were sprayed and it reacted as if someone had walked in a lot of blood. I don't really know what this M-Vac thing is. I don't know if it would be considered like junk science or too new or experimental or whatever, but apparently it can tell you if there's like a lot of blood. Oh, Beth wrote a note. Thank you. Thanks, girl. She says the M-Vac utilizes wet vacuum principles to release and capture cells. Nuclease and DNA-free buffer is sprayed directly onto the surface while the vacuum pressure is simultaneously applied around the spray pattern to collect the buffer and suspended particles in a collection bottle. That didn't help me at all. I don't know if it helped you. I just may not be smart enough, but that's what it says. There was not enough DNA to determine a profile, though, so they were able to tell. Basically, what they say this test showed them was, yes, there was the one drop of blood or whatever that they had found on it that we knew was Annie's blood. But remember, he says that's from a nosebleed. And the police, based on the scene and how she was murdered and all the things, said if somebody was going to get blood on their shoe at this scene, they were going to have a lot of blood on their shoe. So what this test showed was there had been a lot of blood on the shoe, but it had been cleaned off. So this isn't really, I mean, that's a piece that you might be able to present of the puzzle, but it's not enough evidence to arrest him or anything like that. Next, Detective Moore decided to take another look at Spencer Criddle's interview. And remember, Spencer was Chris's best friend who supposedly was with them the night that Annie had the nosebleed and was like, yeah, she had a nosebleed, whatever. However, he didn't definitively say, yes, I saw that she had a bloody nose. What he said was, yeah, I think I remember something like that. Now, when they showed, well, they didn't show the footage of his interview. They showed somebody reenacting it. But when they showed that, it's like a kid on his phone and he's like, yeah, I think I remember something like that. He's not even looking up at them or paying attention. I'm like, okay, rude. Why are they letting him do that? But Detective Moore picks up on this and she's like, well, that's weird. He's on his phone, like texting the whole entire interview. And the detectives had asked him if they could see his phone when they talked to him again and determined that he had been texting girls during this interview. He's talking to police about somebody that he knows who's been murdered. Maybe he didn't like her all that much or anything, you know, like maybe it really was inconsequential to him, which is insane to me because it's a human. But anyway, but he could not have cared less. He rarely even looked up from his phone from what it looks like. What he's texting is he's texting multiple girls about what he wants to do to them and asking them what do they want him to do to them, which I guess you won't know if you don't ask. But he was also texting Chris at the time. And Chris had texted him, hey, the police took my shoes. Annie's blood is on it. I need you to tell them that she had a bloody nose because she did. And he said, I got you. So I don't know that I'm assuming he believed his friend that she really did have a bloody nose and he's just trying to help him because most people are, aren't like, well, my friend could have murdered somebody. But let's don't do that. Unless you saw it, you better not tell the police you fucking saw it because it's not a good look. So that's another piece of the puzzle, right? It's still not enough, but it's another piece. So then Detective Moore re-examines the information they had from Annie and Chris's cell phones from the night of March 10th, 2012. And the maps that Sergeant Johnson had created showed that both Chris and Annie's phones were moving faster than they should be. Because remember, when they were looking at Annie's phone and the GPS tracking data, in the moment, her phone moved it was walking, and then boom, like a shooting star. Even if you were in a car, it wouldn't move the way that it moved. Something weird happened. So, and then it just disappeared, right? Well, Chris's cell phone tracking data was doing the same thing at that time, apparently. Detective Moore couldn't figure out why, though, because they were both moving faster than they should, and they were hitting different towers really quickly. It just didn't make any sense. So she decided to take a cell phone mapping course, and she learned that the reason that both of their phones were tracking so similarly is because they would have been in the same place at the same time. So according to Jacqueline's teacher of the cell phone mapping course, a former police officer, Chris and Annie's phone traveled faster than it should have, because it couldn't lock onto a good connection. So it was causing their cell phones to rapidly ping between different towers to try to actually lock in to some sort of a signal. So Detective Moore drove to towers in the area, mapped it all out, and she found that the only place that they could replicate those types of pings was if you were at the crime scene. And they learned that when Veronica called Chris, remember she called him and said, "Hey, I can't find Annie. Is she with you?" And he said, "No, I haven't seen her, but I talked to her earlier today." When Veronica called him in that moment, the phone picked up a signal. And so they were able to determine that he was there at the crime scene. The call is what forced the phone into a connection to a tower so they could see where it was. So they also determined that when she talked to Chris on the phone, that he was with Veronica and he had not yet murdered her. Darwin Christopher Bagshaw was arrested for Annie's murder, and his bail was set to $1 million. His attorney wanted to keep the case in juvenile court because at the time he was only 14. He was 14 when he murdered her. Judge Dane Nolan heard arguments on both sides, and because of the brutality of the murder, decided that Bagshaw, who was then 17, would be tried in adult court for first-degree murder. However, they would drop the obstruction of justice charge in adult court. Judge Nolan said that if he looked solely at Chris's psychological evaluation and risk assessment, he would have retained the case. He said, quote, "But the court must acknowledge the fact that Chris does present a risk of committing murder again. And if he had stayed in the juvenile court system, he would have only been kept in custody until he was 21 years old if he was convicted. So Chris was ordered to be kept in juvenile detention until his court date." Now, you guys know I have mixed feelings about this, because if his psychological evaluation said that he's a danger and he's going to continue to be a danger and he's going to do this again, then I think you do need to do something more drastic. I don't know what that answer is, legally what they can or can't do. I don't like a 14-year-old being tried as an adult, sentenced as an adult, and put into an adult prison. I don't like that at all. But this is tough, because the way that he killed her was absolutely horrific. So apparently, while in juvenile detention, Bagshaw told his cellmate, roommate, whatever, about the murder. And according to this roommate, Annie had told Chris that she was pregnant, and he said, "Why don't you come meet me by the river? We can run away together, whatever." He brought a shovel to dig a hole that he could bury her in. However, the ground was still frozen, so he tried to dig the hole. He couldn't dig the hole, and so instead he hit her in the head with the shovel. He said that she would not die. He kept hitting her. She kept begging and saying, "Please, I love you. Please stop. Why are you doing this?" All that kind of stuff. He said, apparently he told her, "Shut up, bitch." And then he took the spade of the shovel to her forehead while she was laying down and stomped on it. I can't even imagine. So the police believe that this version of events is likely the truth. and that the roommate wouldn't have any reason to lie about it. He didn't have any pending charges, and he was only in juvenile detention because his mom had sent him there because she found him with marijuana. Mom, look, and I don't know this kid. You sent him to marijuana. I don't know, maybe this marijuana. You sent him to juvenile for marijuana. Like maybe this was like a scared straight situation, but he shared a room with a murderer. Those are two very different, like, hey, don't smoke weed versus he's sharing a room with somebody who brutally killed somebody else. I wouldn't want my son to be a roommate with a murderer if I don't have to. Just before his trial was set to begin, Chris pleaded guilty to the murder of Anne Kasprzak. He said that he hadn't planned on killing her. Like, yes, I hit her in the head with the shovel, but I didn't plan on it. I was just going to, hang out with her at the river there? But then I happened to see a shovel nearby, so I just used it because I got mad. Who would have brought a shovel to a walking trail along the river? There's no reason to dig a hole right there. The only person that's going to bring a shovel is somebody who's planning to dig a hole. And you killed her there. You brought her there to kill her. Who has motive to dig a hole? Like, are you kidding? Get out of our face. Get out of our face. Do you think we're stupid? Like, nobody believes that. So he ended up being sentenced to 15 years to life in prison, and because of his plea, prosecutors agreed to recommend that he get credit for the time he had served since his arrest in October of 2014. Chris's attorney, Chris Bown, I'm not sure how you say that, said that his client had been thinking about taking responsibility for a long time and that there was no deal in place. He stated that Chris feels at peace with his decision. Well, thank God. Veronica believes that Annie told Chris that she was pregnant with the hopes that he'd be like her knight in shining armor, and he would be like, let's run away together, or let's get married, or I'm going to be there for you, and, that he would be this great dad and like all this stuff. And they said that if Veronica hadn't called Chris that night to look for her, they may not have been able to catch him. Like they may not have been able to actually place him at that scene. Annie's stepmother, Jennifer Kasprzak, stated, quote, "I feel very blessed that we do not have to relive this. For years, we've just waited to be able to focus on the joy and the love that we have for Annie and the positive parts of her life and not the way she left us." And Veronica said, quote, "We'd love to know why, but no why or answer will really justify the action. It's not going to bring her back." Darwin Christopher Bagshaw's first parole hearing will be in October of 2034 as set by the Utah Board of Pardons and Parole. If Annie's story stayed with you like it has stayed with me, please consider sharing this episode with someone else. Maybe somebody who understands just how vulnerable teenagers like Annie can be, or just anyone you think should hear the story. Her voice deserves to be remembered for more than just how her life ended. And sharing her story may help to prevent another like hers. Thanks for spending this time with me. Stay safe, stay curious, and ask yourself, WWHD, what would Harriet do? I'll see you next time. I hope not sporadically. If you liked this episode, be sure to like this episode and follow the show so that you never miss out on new episodes. Get in on the conversation on Facebook and Instagram. You can find us at Killer Queens Pod, or you can join our Facebook discussion group at Killer Queens Podcast, where we discuss cases covered on the show and all things 90s. If you want to submit a case to be covered on the show, visit killerqueenspodcast.com/case submission and just complete the form. And if we cover the case, we'll give you a shout out on the show. Lilas.